always, I am Mason, and that is not Galtham.
No, I
Galtham
have not.
right now is over in Japan. So he is on vacation, having a great time. We still wanted to bring you guys some content, so I have brought on my very, very, very good friend, Kasabi Compiles. Um, some of you may know him from the MLB The Show community. He is a content creator there, does a lot of really great stuff. Kasabi, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. This is my podcast debut, so I hope I do all right. But hope Gotham's having a fun time over in Japan.
I think you'll do okay. You've got some pretty big shoes to fill. Ashley's been on here a couple times, so just putting that out there, but I think you'll do okay. So, this entire episode is actually the brainchild of Mr. Kasabi here. So, we are going to talk to you today with about 2 days before the start of the regular season over in the Tokyo series, but about a week and a half before the stateside opening day. We're going to talk about a couple of the stadium situations that we've talked about at length a couple of times now, the Rays and the A's, because things are still weird. And I think that's maybe the nicest way to say that. Um,
Yeah,
Yeah, so we're going to start over in Tampa, where it seems things are even more crazy than they've already been. So Tampa had, if you remember from the last update that we gave, had agreed on a $1.3 billion stadium deal in the gas plant district, which is where the Trop is already located, to tear down the Trop, build a new stadium, and then help develop the area around it to kind of revitalize that area of St. Pete. Um, Things have been a little wonky with the elections, bringing in a new commissioner board for the city, delayed some votes. Ultimately, the funding got approved. Now, after all of that, the Tampa Bay Rays have backed out of the stadium deal. I guess before I give any context there on why or what happened, what is your initial thoughts on the Rays backing out of that deal now?
obviously not great if you're a race fan because there's just the looming question like, are they even going to stay in Tampa Bay? We're kind of seeing that kind of an unprecedented thing, really, with like the two franchises going through this, Oakland and Tampa. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of a necessary decision because you do need to, at some points, stop assessing like all the different options and just make a decision. If you're the Rays, like you need to now put your head down, repair the Trop, make sure that it's playable for MLB games, like having that kind of amenities. So I do kind of commend them for just a little bit, commend them just a little bit for making that decision and just being like, all right, this is what we're riding with. No more debating, no more just what ifs, because at the end of the day, you do need a pro level facility.
So I am actually going to disagree with you on that. I think this is maybe the stupidest thing they could have done because the deadline for all of this to be locked in and they're committed was March 31st. It would have been
A bit
set.
early.
It would have been set. And that would have been the plan. And now, about 2.5 weeks before that, they said, actually, no, we're not in. And they had sent multiple letters to the St. Pete Commissioners Board and all that, talking about how because of a 1 month delay in getting the approvals for all of the bonds and all the money, that was going to cause an increase of somewhere between 2 and 12% to the cost of the stadium. And that is significant. Don't get me wrong. But those sorts of things are going to happen no matter what. I mean, I'm a St. Louis Rams fan, now a Los Angeles Rams fan, unfortunately, but we saw how that whole stadium situation worked out. It took 2 more years and like $3 billion more than it was initially planned to be. And Granted, that was for different reasons. That wasn't just we stuck to the plan and then it just happened to be that much more expensive. That was Stan Kroenke adding this and that, a second team coming in, a whole bunch of stuff. But over here in Tampa, the only things that really would have affected it are increase in labor costs, increase in material costs, and additional time, which does add up a lot. But now they've said, okay, a plan that we have all agreed upon is we're going to back out and now have to go reassess more possibilities. Like we were at the end of this, and now they said we're going to continue. So they're delaying it more, even if the option they choose is cheaper and shorter. Like, and it leaves more uncertainty in the future because at least with this new stadium, you're looking at a 30-year lease.
Right.
Now, like as of today, the Rays are only committed to the Trop for 3 more years, which is not playable for 2025 and potentially the first quarter of 2026, depending on how long it takes to put the roof on. So it's a really weird situation. They were
It
already in a bad spot with plans to fix it, and now it seems like they've taken a step back.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like a temporary band-aid. You would hope that with these commitments to like repair the trop and all of that, that the money and stuff that's being put into it isn't just like a 3-year solution. So I do feel like there's going to be a lot more hashing out in that, trying to see like, hey, can we continue to extend the stuff at the trop with all this that we're putting into it? I might be slightly biased just because I grew up in a climate where there was a dome. I'm one of the few people that actually thinks that the dome has some benefits compared to being outdoors at Steinbrenner Field. But yeah, it's always a tough situation. You got to consider a whole bunch of options, the community around you, a lot of politics and money figures being thrown around. So, um, at the end of the day, like they do need to at some point make a decision. It's obviously not just like a 50-50, like yes or no. There's going to be a lot of nuance and stuff that goes in over the next few years as they talk about the future of Tropicana Field specifically. But and I want to say that ideally you'd like to be able to play at the start of the 2026 season. We all know that deadlines, they move around a bit. There's a lot of extra labor and stuff, costs that go into it, like you mentioned. But at the same time, for the Rays, like you can't keep just playing at a spring training facility for very long time. I think this year for like a 1-year solution, definitely. But if that turns into like 2 years, maybe like three, like that is not ideal. This is Major League Baseball we're talking about. And being able to only seat about 12, 14,000 people is not ideal.
So I completely agree with you there. Um, they really only draw about 8 to 10,000 fans a game anyway. So in a sense, the capacity is not a problem in the short term. Now, long term,
Mhm.
yes, they want to grow and be able to fill a 30,000 seat stadium daily. Um, and part of the issue with that St. Petersburg location is just trying to get there. And so
Mhm.
staying in the gas lamp or the gas plant quarter, sorry, gas lamp is San
San
Diego.
Diego,
They're all the same. Uh,
all the
but
gas.
yeah, uh, but the issue with staying there is you're not increasing your accessibility. And so you're continuing to kind of keep people on the Tampa Bay side of the bridge from coming to your games. Um, and so I think that's probably part of why they're making this decision now, on top of the increase in money. Um, but it feels like that's something they should have considered, I don't know, 10 years ago when this whole process started. So
Right. And part of it is too just seeing my like personal experience with the Metrodome, for example. There was a lot of talks about like moving it somewhere else. Obviously, the Metrodome's a bit more of an ideal location than what Tampa has with the Trop right now, but they ended up just building right on top of the same site because, in some sense, like that's just the easiest decision to make. So I could see them being like, all right, we're gonna build it close to the Trop just because like that's what people are accustomed to. Obviously, like it's really tough to get into that area for the Tampa Bay Rays games. So I don't I'm not as familiar with that local area as much. I don't know like how much of a pox it is to get in and out. But you know, you're going to see like some interest in Steinbrenner Field or a new stadium that the Rays hypothetically build, just because it is like the new thing. It's a different experience. So I will say like probably over the first couple months, like the Rays will be close to selling out, maybe, just because people want to experience something new. To some degree too, it is a bit tighter knit. It's kind of like being at Fenway where you're just like right on top of the field. So I think some fans will get a bit more of like an intimate experience, but over time that novelty starts to wear off. And that's where they are going to be like, well, we gotta get something going, whether that's the Trop again, whether that's a new stadium, whether that's relocating somewhere else. For the sake of race fans, I hope that's not the final decision, but it clock's ticking basically.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time with Steinbrenner Field, it's a little bit of an interesting situation because it's in Tampa proper. And
Hmm.
so all those fans that weren't willing to go across the bridge to go to a Rays game at the Trop, well, now they might be interested to go because it's a lot closer to their house. And so you're going to have almost like the it's weird to describe because it's the same situation but in the other direction is like when Purdue or Indiana University go and play at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis where the Pacers play. It's like you're going to an offsite location for a game which is in an area where you have a lot of fans, so you're going to draw a lot of fans from that area, but they're going
Different
to a
fans.
smaller field. So
Hmm.
it's like it's a little bit of a weird situation, but that might honestly help here in the short term. And potentially that's why they're doing this is because they're trying to gauge if it's better to be in St. Pete or in Tampa proper. And the biggest problem with that is there is not a very it's not very feasible to have an open air stadium in Tampa. Yes, the spring training facilities are open air, but they're only used for a couple months. Um,
Hmm.
for a stadium that's used from basically the middle of March until ideally November, you're going through a lot of different weather patterns there in Tampa. So you kind of need that dome, and there's only a handful of prime locations in that area that can support a dome, which is why it's been so difficult to find and why building over the Trop is ideally your answer. Because you already have that location, you know it's large enough to hold a dome, which is larger than an open air stadium, just because you have to enclose everything. It's
Hmm.
not just the playing surface that you're enclosing, it's the entire thing.
Full
So,
spread.
yeah. So it is naturally a larger footprint and a lot harder to fit into a city that already exists. So,
Right. And like you mentioned too, part of it is just the climate. With the Metrodome, just my personal experience, that one deflated because they had snow and they actually did have some stuff in place to kind of wick away the snow, make sure it didn't just sit on top and, cause a de-stress in the dome itself where it just kind of folded in. Down in Florida, you have hurricane level winds. You just have a lot of that, swirling effect with like the different temperature changes and stuff. And I know a lot of people might be like, hey, like Florida sunshine is great. Like, why wouldn't you want to be outdoors? But you have a ton of rain there too. I'm sure Steinbrenner Field is going to have an obscene amount of rainouts this year. Uh, and part of it is just the climate too, where if you have like air conditions, consistent levels of play, it's better for the players. They can just kind of go into it with that sense of regularity. A lot of people talk about like the turf and the dirt too, like same kind of thing. Once you get a feel for it, you start to get used to it. But also just Florida clientele. There might be some older folks down there. There's a lot of people that go there for retirement homes, and sometimes just having that controlled, like 70-degree AC, like it's really good for all sorts of different swaths of fans, every age.
Yeah. Like I've been up to Milwaukee and I love that stadium. Like it definitely needs some upgrades and things, but just the difference between Miller Park, the American Family Field, whatever it's called now. The difference between going there and going to like Busch Stadium or going to Wrigley Field is insane because you can have the roof open, you can have it closed, you can have the panels open, you can have them closed. So if it's raining or snowing or whatever it tends to do in April in some of these northern cities, like you can still have baseball and experience that through all these or these I guess see-through panels, which is something that the Trop doesn't necessarily have because the Trop is
Hmm.
very 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 dark, which Gotham here a couple weeks ago, actually, in our American League East preview, I believe. Yeah, I think so. Was talking about how. Oh no, it was the American League West. We were talking about the how T-Mobile Park it just is really really dark, and it makes it such a worse environment for hitters. So stadiums like T-Mobile Park, like Chase Field in Phoenix, and like the Trop, it is seeing the ball is different there than it is in some of these other stadiums, including American Family Field, which is a very well lit dome. And so there's a lot of things like that that you have to fix in order to maybe bring it up to the same major league level that have kind of been left behind. So there's a lot of things with the Tampa area that it's like a new stadium would be ideal because you could take the dome and start from scratch and fix all the things that were wrong. But it takes
And to
time
your
and it takes a lot of money.
to your point too, with Steinbrenner Field, like a lot of the games that they play there are going to be during the same pattern, same time of the year. A lot of them are going to be during the daytime where it's the warmest. So I do know they've tried to put in a lot of money and a lot of upgrades to make it more major league viable for all times of the year, all times of the day. But you still might run into some problems like that where, you get to like May or June and people are like, I can't see the ball once you get past like a certain time of day, where they're going to have to make a lot of emergency fixes like that. And obviously, something like that isn't ideal because it can sway the whole path of a game, maybe the whole path of a season. I know the Rays are kind of going through like a little bit of a retooling where they have a lot of younger players and stuff where, you know, AL East is tough. Maybe they make a run at it, maybe they don't. But you don't want that something like that being taken out of your hands just because, oh, we're playing in some place different that's not accustomed for something like this.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a bad situation, I think, is the crux of what we're getting to. Now, I do actually have some information on uh, the plan to fix up the Trop, which would be significantly quicker to do. The Rays have actually pitched a list of major renovations with a 10-year lease extension at the Trop.
Okay.
So instead of paying a 1.3 billion for a new stadium to lock them in for 30 years, the Rays have this plan that the team, the city of St. Petersburg, and the county of Pinellas County would each pay $200 million for large scale renovations to the park to lock them in until 2038. Now that would repair the roof. It would probably go to I don't have a list of everything that they want to do. They didn't really publish that. But I would assume that it would fix some of the lighting issues. It would kind of bring a lot of the fan experience things up to date a little bit more. A little bit similar to what the Jays just went through with Rogers Center. So Rogers
Hmm.
Center a couple years ago was not not old, not dilapidated, but it was stale. And the fan experience was kind of meh. And then they just went through and did like a 3 off-season renovation, and it is gorgeous. I just went with
Mhm.
our producer T Rad here about a year ago, and they did a great job. And I think maybe the Rays are looking at that, going, "Oh, maybe we could actually make something of this to be like the Rogers Center, save us some money." But as far as the county's concerned and the city's concerned, you're putting in about half of what you would do anyway, and you're getting a third of the guarantee out of it. So I don't see this exact plan the Rays are bringing to the table actually going through. There's going to be a lot of negotiation. I think the county and the city are going to require a significantly longer commitment because during this process, the Rays can also explore moving to different cities.
Right. So you would hope that maybe it's just one of those things where it's like we can just kick the can down the road, get like that 10-year commitment. But like you said, it's still like a pretty hefty amount that they'd have to contribute. And, if you're the Rays, like again, it's just one of those things where it's something that brings in audiences all year long. It's not like an NFL stadium where they only use it like 10, 20 times a year. And I guess I'm not as familiar with the Trop, like what else they kind of host year rounds. But having that facility, maybe making some slight upgrades, like you said, to the fan experience, just to kind of get some more butts and chairs in the meantime. I think it's something where, it might be worth the investment. But this is just like the initial offer from the Rays, from what you kind of described. I'm sure there'll be some hashing out like that. But if you're the Rays, like the damage to the Trop has been known for a while. They've done quite a few assessments where um, ideally, like there aren't going to be too many changes to this as far as like cost and materials and just all the other stuff that kind of gets tossed in along the way. So hopefully they're able to reach a resolution quick. I know that's never the case, but if you're the Rays, at least you can kind of be like, this is our temporary plan. We've had quite a bit of time to look over it, or at least like again know the extent of what we're trying to fix here.
And this plan would also get them back in the Trop mid 2026 if they were to start it today. And
Hmm.
so it's one of those that it's going to be another day for day slip. So you're probably looking 2027, which is 1 year sooner. The Rays are arguing 2 years because they argue that 1 month delay of financing for the whole stadium delayed it about a year, which maybe not. They're obviously going to say what they can.
Hmm.
Um, the other wrinkle to this, which has nothing to do with the stadiums themselves, is that Stu Sternberg has pissed off all of Major League Baseball with this situation. And this is astounding to me because we're going to talk about the A's here in a minute. And John Fisher has been a nightmare for the league for years now. And not a single time has the league said publicly he needs to sell the team. But we had exactly that with Stu Sternberg here a couple weeks ago. Rob Manfred's and a couple of the owners had suggested that it's time for Stu Sternberg to sell the team. If he cannot get this situation figured out, which he's already passed the deadline that the league had set, he's at risk of losing a whole bunch of financial incentives from the league as far as profit sharing and all this stuff. And now they're pressuring to or get a new owner for the team. And not just that, there is a potential ownership group already identified um, of Edward DeBartolo Jr., whose family, parts of his family, own the San Francisco 49ers. That ownership group would potentially also involve the Yankees minority owner, Joe Malloy. And so the league is already putting together a potential successor to Sternberg after 17 years of trying to figure out a new stadium. So they're tired of it. and the $60 million of the revenue sharing money is at risk of drying up pretty darn quick. So
Very interesting too, because if you ask like the, casual baseball fan, just be like, which of these two franchises, Oakland, Las Vegas, Sacramento, whatever you want to consider them, the A's or the Rays, like which one has been kind of messing up harder? A lot of them would probably be like, oh, well, the A's, just they're a historic franchise. There's just been a lot of like stuff being bungled. So maybe it's just the fact that like the Rays haven't been around as long, where maybe there's no history there comparison. But yeah, I mean, just for all of that to be going on with the Ace franchise and, not a peep, I'm sure Major League Baseball is kind of happy in a sense on in the background being like, hey, they're moving to Las Vegas. We've seen other franchises, teams go to Las Vegas in pro sports and they're having like a ton of success right away. So I wonder if they're just like kind of sitting behind the scenes, like crossing their fingers almost and just being like, oh my gosh, like, you know, this team just moved to Las Vegas and this is all the hullabaloo that was created. That's not as much as we expected. Like maybe we can kind of force the race to go somewhere else. So that's a conspiracy for another time, of course. But
so
um,
I was actually going to go into the conspiracies now. So
sure.
my conspiracy theory here is that Major League Baseball and the ownership groups do in fact want John Fisher out of the league, but they have a backroom deal to allow him to move to Vegas, which puts Major League Baseball in a better financial space because they have now a team in the gambling capital of the world as they are increasing their partnership with different gambling groups. It
Right.
seems like a match made in heaven from that side.
Hmm.
And so once he gets there, then they're probably going to convince him to sell, or he's already committed to selling the team once they're there to an ownership that is going to invest money into the club. And he'll get his money from increasing the value of the team. They'll get their money from being in a new market, and everyone's going to be happy. And that's why we haven't seen the league pushing him to sell. Whereas Sternberg, on the other hand, has publicly said he is not selling the team. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Hmm.
But it's been 17 years. We've had like 6 different stadium proposals. We had a 50-50 split home and home situation with Montreal and Tampa. We're now going to a minor league stadium, which that one is due to an act of God. Like I'm not putting that on Sternberg by any means. He did
Hmm.
not create Hurricane Milton, no matter what conspiracy theorists may say. Um, it was a really bad situation for the entire area. And so, yeah, a 27-year-old stadium with a 27-year-old basically plastic roof was not going to hold up in that. So, understandable.
And right. And I think the thing with the Rays is when you compare them to the A's, they're in a slightly better situation, I think, with the facility that they have. Not to say that Sutter Health Park isn't up to standard or anything. Just like to me, the playing conditions, just all of that kind of goes into the slog or the journey of like an entire baseball season. I do think the Rays are going to be a little bit more fortunate in that sense than the A's. Again, we'll have to see how that stadium takes the whole wear and tear of a full major league season, whereas like, maybe just a couple months, February to maybe April for spring training. So I think if you're the Rays, like, it could be a whole lot worse. And like you said, not that anybody can really control an act of God. Um, but I think that they'll be able to make the best out of that situation for now.
So, I actually want to take this opportunity to switch over to the A's because I actually have a thought kind of going off what you just said there. Sacramento is taking this opportunity to bring in the A's, and they are running with it. So
Hmm.
Sacramento had made bids in the past for major league franchises. And the ownership group of the AAA Sacramento River Cats, who are in the San Francisco Giants organization, they now are seeing that there is an opening, there is a void in um, Major League Baseball in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is huge. Like, it definitely needs two teams. You wouldn't just leave Chicago with one team. You wouldn't just leave New York with one team or Los Angeles. I mean, Los Angeles kind of already only has one team, but you get the point. Like, the Bay Area is massive. It's still growing. And
Hmm.
Sacramento being only 2 hours away, if they can improve their stadium and prove that this city can support a team for 3 years, they're putting themselves ahead of some of these cities like Portland, like Nashville, who haven't had the opportunity to show that they can support that and potentially get a team in the future during an expansion. So there are currently renovations going on to Sutter Health Park, which I've been to Sutter Health Park a couple times. It is a really nice stadium. I liked it. There were issues with it, um, but like the scoreboard was pretty small. Like I couldn't see it from my seat, and I was sitting a couple rows from the field. Um, but those are things that are easy to change. Like they're expensive, but they're easy to change. And right now, the River Cats and the Giants are investing money into this to um, upgrade all of the food and beverage service, the club levels. They are installing a temperature controlled lounge with a 15-foot TV, premier seating in the first four rows, complimentary food, the outfield edge, the Glit Edge Club, is getting complimentary beer and wine with build your own hot dog and nacho bar. The city of West Sacramento, which West Sacramento and downtown Sacramento are split only by the river. So you have basically the Sacramento Kings play here, and then you have Old Town Sacramento, um, right along the water, and then there's a yellow bridge, and then Sutter Health Park. And there was nothing around Sutter Health Park. It was just a stadium there with parking. But West Sacramento is adding a 300 unit office and apartment building that are under construction already. They're adding 4,000 housing units and 12 million square feet in development space. Like they're seeing this as an opportunity to build um, a lasting area of West Sacramento that could potentially be leveraged in the future. So while I agree with you right this second, the Rays are in a better situation because that's the Yankees that own that stadium in Steinbrenner Field. I think Sacramento's going to go for it, man. I think they're putting in all the stops here. So,
Yeah, definitely. And if you're Sacramento, like there's a lot of cities like this in pro sports where they have maybe one team, but they don't really have something that encompasses the entire calendar year. So if you're Sacramento, you have the River Cats. That's a affiliate league, not like pros necessarily. Your only
but they
pro,
they draw, by the
they
way.
draw
They
fans.
draw.
Yes. But like from a pro sense, you have the Kings, but not much else, and that's the same argument that people make for like Seattle for the longest time. They lost the Sonics, didn't have the Kraken for a while. It's just like for a city like Seattle, like what do you do once the Mariners are out of season? There's just not a whole lot going on. So, and that's where if you're the city, like you're gonna throw out all the stops just to say like, hey, you can come see events here all year long, not just necessarily whenever the pro teams are around. And the River Cats, like you said, they have good attendance numbers. They have a decent team too, from what I remember.
Mhm.
So why not try and take a stab at it?
Yeah, exactly. And the guy who owns the River Cats is the guy that owns the Kings.
Oh, did not know
So
that.
yeah, so he knows what he's doing.
Hmm.
He knows
He knows the
exactly what
climate.
he's doing. And so I think that this is going to be a really big thing for the city of Sacramento. It's only 3 years commitment, but if they play their cards right, it could lead to something huge in the future. So I'm really pleased with kind of how Sacramento is treating this situation, while I hate the entire situation. So
Right. And part of what I will want to see going forward is just the River Cats like having to share their stadium with the A's because I have heard that since the River Cats, like it's their stadium, they have their preference of when they want to schedule their games. You know, like they have the seniority, the tenure there. So what I will probably envision is they'll take a lot of the night games. The A's won't have too many where they're going to be playing there a lot during the daytime. And, you know, that's going to cause some issues. Sacramento is very hot as far as the climate goes. And
Can
I think
confirm.
that, yes,
Can
so
confirm.
I was looking up earlier when researching for this. Oakland in the summer has like an average temp of about 72, 73. Sacramento is closer to like the 90s. There's like a huge difference despite their geographic location. And part of me is wondering if that's why the A's are suddenly tossing all this money at free agents. You know, they signed a couple big guys during the offseason where it's just like, oh my gosh, once we get to the dog days of summer, like our guys are going to be gassed. They're not going to be happy. Like we need to spend some money to actually attract some talent here because otherwise, like the A's might just fall flat on their face in the standings leading up to their move to Las Vegas. So I don't think that's just John Fisher out of the kindness of his heart being like, well, I guess I'll spend a little bit of money now and get some good graces back with the fans. I think it's truly something that they thought was necessary in order to kind of keep them at the same level that they have been performing. Because the A's, you know, they're not constantly like at the bottom of the standings due to their payroll. Like they do have some good front office guys in place where, you know, they're still competitive at times or, you know, even making a run for the division title at times. So I think for, you know, trying to even that out with the weather, with the changing times of day and stuff that they're playing in this new climate or situation, they needed to spend a little bit more to get some of those more top of the line guys to get some better performance out of the team.
Yeah. So being right in the valley there in California, basically as you're driving from Oakland to Sacramento, you end up going over I don't know what the name of the hills are, but there's basically you see these hills from Oakland that are in the distance. As soon as you get to the top of them, the temperature changes about 25 degrees. And it's insane. And it's a desert. You go from being the Bay Area where it's gorgeous all year round. You need a jacket just in case the wind picks up. To you kind of don't want to be standing in the sun all that long. I worked out there for what 3 months from July to September of last year. Was that or 2 years ago? Like, man, it was it was miserable at times. But
Hmm.
yeah, so this would be interesting for sure. But the other thing that I wanted to kind of mention with the A's here is that their situation is not fully figured out either. Like they talk about how like they have this plan. The Tropicana hotel in Vegas was blown up in November of last year, so they've broken ground. Um, but they haven't. They haven't got the permits to even grade the property yet. Like they're getting ready to do that, and then the true groundbreaking will be in June. And there's still a whole bunch of fights going on in Vegas with the teachers unions and all this stuff because it some people think that it was shady how that whole deal came to be. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the A's have still not proven to me that they know how to get this done. And we have 3 years in Sacramento. That's locked in. I fully believe that that's going to happen and it's going to go as well as it can as far as the stadium is concerned. But there was a new set of renderings for the stadium in Vegas, stadium in Vegas released last week. And there was a very notable thing missing in that in those renderings, and that is parking. So the Clark County Code requires that the new stadium has 7,500 parking spaces, based on a standard of one space per 4 seats, and 150 spaces for the 60,000 square feet of office space, for a total of 7,650 parking spaces. That would be 25.5% of the seating capacity. Dodger Stadium, which has the most parking out of any stadium in the league, has 30%. Now, where the issue lies is that the current designs for the stadium only have 2,470 on site parking spaces. So they are at a third of what is required by code, given the current designs of the stadium and the underground parking garage for it.
Mhm.
So their design is not locked in. And
Oh,
that's kind of the key thing before you break ground on something is for the design to be locked in. Guess what gets built first? The underground parking. Because it's kind of the entire structure of the thing above it. So it's I am still laughing at this whole A's situation because yeah, the stadium they were in sucked. It was built in the 60s. It was a multi-purpose stadium. Guess who else had one of those? St. Louis from 1966 to 2005. The St. Louis Cardinals football team played there. It wasn't great as a multi-sport thing. A lot of cities had these stadiums, and all of these cities tore them down. Cincinnati had one. Pittsburgh had one in Three River Stadium. I believe that the Metrodome was one of those, was it not?
yep.
Yep.
Vikings and
And
Twins.
then
Yep.
uh, Milwaukee had one in oh, what was the name of it? Like County Park or something like that. I don't remember the name of it, but it this is really the only one left. Yes, it needed to be torn down. It needed to be rebuilt into something a little bit more baseball specific. I still do not understand how this entire situation came from this because it should not have been this hard and should, in theory, be locked in to move forward and be ready to play in 2028. Because again, the A's were at risk of losing their revenue sharing. The A's were at risk of potentially being forced to sell. They've already pissed off their entire fan base and don't have one right now. So which team is in the worst spot right now? I can't tell.
Yeah, I mean, me just personally, like, I feel like as a casual fan of like both of these teams, I feel like the A's get a little bit more playtime, a little bit more airtime, where the grievances and stuff, those are brought up a bit more constantly. And obviously, you have a bit of the history with the A's. It's like they've won World Series down there. The Rays have been to World Series, but they don't really have the same legacy that they do. And to your point, like if this is something where Sacramento can kind of just swoop in because of the lack of planning, the lack of conviction that Las Vegas has, you can't start construction while still being in code violations. You can't build a stadium halfway and then just be like, oh, wait, this doesn't work. You can't just have concepts of a plan. You need to have that all just, you know, thoroughly researched and done in order to move forward with this project. And I don't know if that's something that they'll even be able to do in 3 years. I feel like if there's a franchise that Major League Baseball is going to try and rush to avoid just more public grievances and just negative thoughts about, it's going to be Las Vegas, and obviously the money's there. They want to bring a team to Las Vegas to kind of bring in that tourist traffic, just revenues from being in a place like Las Vegas. But yeah, I'm not still fully convinced either that they'll be able to make this happen. Where I think maybe with the experiment that goes on in Sacramento, depending on like the fan turnout and how the 50-50 goes between them and the River Cats spending time at that stadium, maybe they'll be like, hey, we can continue to put renovations into the stadium. Maybe it's worth building a different stadium completely in Sacramento, where the city makes a bid and just be like, we were diligent in our time being hosts. Maybe throw a bone our way. So I don't know. Both of these situations, both with the A's and the Rays, could extend for years before we really have like a solid plan or even understanding of what's going to be going on.
And amongst all of this, Major League Baseball is still um, in what I think might be the prime position to expand. And they've
Mhm.
said that they will not expand until these stadium situations are resolved. But we have now uh, the Nashville
Stars, right?
Stars,
Mhm.
who have been like increasing their own publicity of their thing. They've released a hat with New Era now, and like they're pushing for a team. We have Portland, who is still pushing for a team. Raleigh, North Carolina, pushing for a team. Salt Lake City, pushing for a team. And all of these teams that would have to pay a ridiculous sum of money to join the league, that's a major windfall for Major League Baseball to bring in two teams at the same time. They'd make so much money. Like
Oh,
they are
especially
just chomping at the bit. And you have these two franchises who cannot get their shit together that are holding that up. This is what Manfred wants to do before his tenure is up is get these two new franchises and take the league to 32 because that cements him as being a all-time great commissioner aside from all the other stuff he's done, but that's what people will remember him for. That will be his legacy. So you have all of that in the background. So you know that while I'm frustrated, and I've been frustrated about this for what, 4 episodes talking about this before, it, like I'm the calm one. It's just
and,
crazy
you
to
know,
think about.
you've kinda gone through this with a different league too, but if you're Manfred, you have all of this going on in the background. Meanwhile, the iron's hot where you wanna strike. You have stars in the league like Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, like, something that baseball has really needed for a time. There hasn't been this big of like generational talent at the forefront of, just the nationwide audience, the North America in larger terms for a long time. And now you have international interest that you haven't really seen before with Japan. We've had a few Japanese players, we've had a lot of like international players, but this is a phenomenon. And I think the Tokyo series is kind of indicative of that. So
Well,
for
and we
all of
had the
this to
Soul
be going
series last year that was the same
World
thing.
Series, exactly. Been to Mexico City too. So, you're trying to do all these different places and drum up some fan interest where I think this would be a proper time for some expansion because, you have the viewership numbers and stuff. And obviously they need to hash out a little bit more of like MLB TV, blackouts, that kind of stuff, where that'll probably take a few years before it really takes a good effect or like a decent state that like fans would be happy with. But I'm like, this is the proper time for that before Shohei retires, before somebody like them gets injured, maybe hypothetically. So in order to do that, though, like you said, you kind of need to figure out what's going on with these two other teams in the current moment before you can make a push towards expanding to, unless, some team makes like a crazy bid. And I don't know the whole like process of how that would work, where maybe, the A's move to Nashville or something like that instead. Who really knows? But and we've seen expansion work in other leagues. Like I'm a hockey fan, and I still don't know if like hockey has the same draw as baseball, but we've seen some really good expansions there recently with Seattle and Las Vegas, where both of them were successful right away too. Um,
And even in like a significantly less popular league, the MLS, they've been expanding. They brought in St. Louis, they brought in San Diego, they brought in I think two other cities as well.
Miami recently, I
Yeah,
think.
Miami and um the popularity of that league is growing. The talent level in that league is growing. It's still not on par with its European counterpart where they would like it to be, but it's got to start somewhere. And we're seeing expansion in the WNBA. Like with all the recent success and hype there with Caitlin Clark, with Cameron Brink, with Angel Reese, with some of Juju Watkins is going to be in the draft here this year, and a couple other like superstar college players. More of them are coming up. We're seeing this at just these phenomenal athletes at a ridiculous pace now. Like this is the time for sports to expand if they want to. Major League Baseball has been wanting to expand for 25 years, and they haven't done it because they've been waiting for a couple of these teams to figure their crap out, and they haven't. So they're about to miss their moment, I think. Because we had between what was the last, I guess, group of superstar players like this? It would have been or to come up. It would have been A-Rod and Pujols and like your Scott Rowlands. I mean, Rowlands not really the same level, but like Manny Ramirez and who else was in that group? Miguel Cabrera. Um, like that early 2000s, late 90s, that was the time, and that's exactly when they expanded, 1998. So yeah, this is their moment.
You would think.
Well, you got any other thoughts on these two teams, or do you have any other stadiums that you would perhaps like to discuss?
I think we covered just about everything with the A's and the Rays. Like obviously we'll kind of see here in the next month or so. Well, there'll be some eyeballs on them here in April, like once we get to like opening day. But I'm mostly curious about what starts to happen, towards the middle of the season, once we're kind of like in the deep of it. How those franchises will be doing. Like, will they seem gassed? Will they have maybe some durability issues with like injuries? Because that's the thing is like the heats, it obviously like dehydrates you and stuff like that, where might lead to more cramps, might lead to more strains and pulls. So, will those teams just be going through a record number? Maybe more the A's specifically in the Rays in that case, but like, will it kind of pile up their injury report in a way? So, and
This is
you
a
know,
team that has a lot of really young prospects that are really good right now too in
yes,
the
a
A's.
lot of
So
fast guys. So you hate to see something like that where it maybe affects a player's career or trajectory, or kind of sets them off for a year where you're not able to see some of the star power that you would hope for if you're a fan going to maybe a stadium like that. So yeah, I guess that's my main concerns, or like my main talking points for once we start the 2025 season is how are they going to handle that specifically, because I do feel like there will be some fan response in a way where people are going to be interested. They're going to watch the games. Selfishly, as a fan, like there are some days where I wish there were afternoon games. So like there might be more A's and Rays games where you'll be able to like catch baseball at all parts of the day that you may not have been able to previously. Um, and I know there are some people that would love to make a trip and see that in person while you can. People like me, they love going to all 30
I was
stadiums
going to
trying
say, I
to.
feel like that's very pointed to the two of us.
Yes. So you've been more fortunate to visit some stadiums that I haven't yet. Like I'm still in the beginning of my journey, but um, and seeing like how those compare to other pro stadiums of the past. I know I've kind of alluded to it a couple times during this episode, but the Metrodome was a place that I grew up with before they moved to Target Field in 2010. uh, it was a nice place to catch a ball game. I know people had problems with the roof and like the turf and everything, but there was just like a nice atmosphere about it that was calming during like a normal regular season game. But once you got to the playoffs, like it was loud. The roar of the crowd was something that I don't feel like any MLB franchise can really replicate. Maybe Rogers Center, you had the Joey Bats bat flip, where there was just like the roar of the crowd because it was more enclosed. So maybe with a park where it's a bit closer with the fans, you have less volume of people, but they do get a little bit more of that intimacy, and maybe during a playoff run, like that can kind of propel a team onward. I don't really know for certain, and would like to see if it gets to that point.
Yeah. So I'm very much looking forward to this season for these two clubs for a couple different reasons. One, I think this A's team can actually be very good.
Hmm.
I have hopes in this A's team. Uh, Same with the Rays. Actually, they get McClanahan back. They've got some young prospects in Xavier Isaac and Junior Caminero and a couple of these guys. Like these are clubs that can be very good. They can be in the playoff hunt. These are not the 2024 Chicago White Sox and Colorado Rockies that we're dealing with here. The
And if Yeah, if
So
you're the A's, like you maybe have more of an opportunity with the division that you're in too. But even with all the distractions last year, I felt like the players did pretty well considering.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we had Lawrence Butler 22 and 18 on the season for home runs, stolen bases. Like he earned himself a contract out of that. Like from
Mhm.
a team that doesn't give out contracts. So there
Or
are
even
bright spots for these clubs, even with the seeming doom and gloom of the stadium situations hanging above their heads. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this continues to play out. I'm hoping it resolves quickly for both of these situations. I Parking, I don't think is going to be the end of the world as far as stadium design. If that's what they have to fix, they'll figure it out.
Mhm.
But it's just when that's the thing that's overlooked, and it's very much there's a specific number you have to include, and you're at a third of that. It I question other parts of the design as well.
we were just a little bit closer. It's like 7,000 versus you're at like 6,500, but like the percent to what you
Yeah,
need is
but when
worrying.
it's 7,600 and you're at 24, yeah, that's pretty rough. There's going to be some misses in other parts of that design as well. It's going to add some more money. It's going to add some more time. I would not be surprised if the A's were in Sacramento until 2030.
hmm
Like so, yeah. Well, Kasabi, thank you very, very much for joining me today and talking about this. This has been a great conversation. Everybody, if you want to follow Kasabi over on Twitter/X, it is at Kasabi Compiles. Kasabi and Compiles, both starting with a K. Very
hmm
important. Um,
Alliteration.
Alliteration. So, anything else you want to throw on there is on top of your Twitter?
Uh, Not really. I mean, if you guys are just casual fans of baseball, I tweet a lot about the Twins and Cubs, I suppose. And yeah, I mean, fortunate to have met you through the MLB community, Mason. We've definitely had our fair share of stories, a few different ballparks that we visited. But looking forward to doing more of that here too going forward. I know I got to catch a game down in near St. Louis here pretty soon.
Yeah, and come down, check out Cincinnati with me sometime this year. I'll come up. We'll go up to Twin Cities, and I'll finally check that one off my list. So we've got a couple we could do this year. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone listening. We will see you next week for our full season preview for 2025 before I head to St. Louis for opening day. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod. If you enjoy card collecting, check out our sister YouTube channel at Getaway Day Cards.